Welcome to Granite State Update. I'm Bill Greiner, and I'm joined in studio by New Hampshire Governor Sununu. Welcome, Governor.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
I think the last time we had you in here was before COVID, which seems like a long time ago.
Pre-COVID is like 6 lifetimes ago. I think we can all agree.
So one of the things that we're seeing in New Hampshire, post-COVID is the kind of economic rejuvenation. Things are open, things are good, things are better. Recently, we saw some great news. The unemployment rate in New Hampshire, I believe, was 2.3%, and in the last month or so, 1,200 or so Granite staters have come back to the workforce. Talk to us about why our unemployment rate is where it is and why we are seeing people come back to the workforce when nationally we don't really hear that as
Yeah, so the unemployment rate number is pretty astounding, and it's not just the 2.3%. I think last week there were less than 2,000 people out of 1.4 million, less than 2,000 actually on the unemployment rolls. There's just so much opportunity out there. There's lots of jobs. When COVID first hit, we invested a lot of our CARES Act money into businesses, more than any other state. We put it into businesses. We made sure they were open. We made sure there were guidelines so folks were safe, but they were open and moving forward, and we were kind of propping them up. There was some federal assistance as well. And in doing that, knowing that there was going to be a recovery in 21 and 22, it was really making sure that, if businesses were to close, getting them going again is really hard. They might never come back. Same with nonprofits. So we put all our money into those types of organizations. So when the recovery came back, they were flying out like a rocket. And that's exactly what happened. So we were able to stay way ahead of the game, especially in the Northeast. Now, we have one of the strongest economies in the country. We're the only state with population growth in 2021. Businesses are pouring in, young families are pouring in. That's exactly what you want to see to make sure that things are cooking. And if the economy is going well, that allows us at the government level, when you talk about programs of opioids and mental health and all of these other issues, those are our missions to take those challenges head on. We can fulfill those missions when the economy is going well. And so even though we've cut taxes across the board, we've gone through a lot of deregulation for business, which is why everybody wants to be here now, that helps actually raise more revenue at the state level. So you can cut taxes and build more revenue because the economy is growing naturally. So it's just been kind of gangbusters, which is great. We're getting a lot of folks out of New Jersey and New York, Massachusetts, of course, just like in Texas and Idaho are getting a lot of folks out of California. We're kind of the magnet for the Northeast, and you can't take it for granted. It was designed. We really designed it this way. We focused on businesses. We focused on employees. We focused on that opportunity, and it's coming to fruition, which is good. So we got to kind of keep our foot on the gas, and we could have tough times ahead as a country, as we know, with inflation, gas prices. But we still have the lowest energy rates in New England. We have the lowest gas prices in New England. We have the lowest inflationary costs in New England because we're constantly putting our efforts on the economic side, which gives people a little more financial freedom in their homes. It's hard. It's going to be hard, and we could have a soft recession. But here in New Hampshire, I feel very confident we're going to stay 2 steps ahead of everybody else on the East Coast.
Do you hear from businesses across the state being concerned about labor?
Oh, that's all we hear. Yeah, that's the number one issue is workforce, especially in areas of nursing, social services, the development to the disabled community. Having those are the types of jobs that just need that one-on-one interaction. A lot of folks are taking jobs where they can work from home, like working remote is much more common now. So a lot of folks are leaving the service industry, and that could be working at a hardware store or a restaurant or being a nurse. Those are real services where you have to have that one-on-one interaction. So the dynamics of our economy are changing quite drastically. So even though we have more people moving in, our businesses are growing just so fast here that it's really hard to keep up with the workforce challenge.
And I suspect that housing is a big part of that.
Housing is now housing. There you go. That's the domino in front of the workforce issue. If workers want to come, and we've heard this before, workers want to come, but if they have no place to live, they can't be there. So the business can't be successful. So the system doesn't kind of fulfill on its potential. So I created the Invest NH housing program, which is a $100 million investment, never even been considered by the state before, very unprecedented, but it really makes sure that we're investing not just in the greater Manchester or greater Nashua area, but allows all the cities and towns across the state to take advantage for small projects, large projects. It helps invest in those projects with funding. It helps incentivize towns to move the permitting very quickly. Towns get rewarded. The faster you permit the low and middle income multifamily housing, $10,000 per unit, we send a check to the town to offset costs and liabilities that the town would take on and incentivize them to move quickly. So it's not just about the thousands of units we want to put onto the market, it's about the speed at which we want to put them onto the market. That's why the system was designed that way. Those applications should go out in mid-June, which is pretty exciting, with dollars rolling out later this summer, because it has to be now. One thing I never accept is government moving at the speed that we all know government can move, which is very, very slow. We're always trying to push ourselves to be quick, to be efficient, move those dollars out and create that opportunity today.
After the first calendar quarter of 2022, the state showed a surplus, I believe, of $130 million or so over plan, over budget. Talk about that. Yeah,
that's it's way more than that. Look, when I became governor, I think the largest surplus we had ever had was $65 million in over a 2-year period. Last month we did $130 million over plan. The surplus is absolutely huge. Now, I think that a lot of that will go to the rainy day fund. That gives us a lot of opportunity for one-time spending. But revenue is not the state's problem right now, by any means. Spending the extra revenue in a smart way to lower the tax burden on our citizens. For example, we're sending $30 million back for roads and bridges at the local level. So your property taxes don't have to pay for those roads and bridges. We send more dollars back per child in education than ever before to offset those types of costs. We're investing in clean drinking water, wastewater treatment systems, those things that are typically paid by your property taxes. The state is going to send you cash to do that, to offset that. So the state can't control your property taxes, but by reinvesting at the local level in these one-time projects, so the bonding isn't so heavy in some of the cities and towns, and those opportunities can really come to fruition without creating a massive tax burden on the local citizens. That's the opportunity that we're trying to create with all this extra surplus.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that we're not seeing inflation as bad in our state as we might be seeing it nationally, and obviously that's changing day to day. Gas prices are high here, but not as high as they are in other places. Why are we in a situation where New Hampshire's better positioned than federally?
So let's talk about energy first. So we have the lowest gas tax around. So naturally, given New England, we just have the lowest gas prices. I think Connecticut is second to us in New England, but in Massachusetts and I think even Vermont, very, very high prices. New York is just astronomical. So we've been able to, again, by keeping taxes low, because it's not our money, it's your money, and being smart about how we invest our gas tax money into our roads. We still have some of the best roads and bridges across the Northeast, but we're just very efficient about how we spend it. On energy prices, so gas also relates to energy costs. I think what we've been able to do is not do dumb things that would otherwise cause your energy costs, your home energy bill to increase. So, for example, when I became governor, let's put it this way: since I became governor, the rate at which, like Massachusetts, energy rates have risen, ours is about half as much. So we're always going up a little bit. Everyone in New England is, but places like Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts are skyrocketing their energy costs. We're not. We make smart investments in renewable energy. I think we make smarter investments in how we design our regulatory system, knowing that every time we make those investments, that subsidy has to be paid. A lot of times by folks on fixed incomes or lower income families, and we make sure those families are first at the trough to get the economic benefits, while we all get the environmental benefits of the renewable energy projects that we're promoting. So I think our teams are just much smarter in terms of how we do it. We always promote those projects, but we look at them through the lens of the ratepayer first. How is it going to impact a family? Every time that an elderly person in a fixed income situation turns on a light, their extra dollars are going to a subsidy in some form. Let's minimize that impact on those individuals while still getting the best environmental impact. So we work really hard, not just saying yes to every project that comes across our desk, but the ones that really fit within New Hampshire's needs. We're a green state. We're a very environmentally conscious state, and that's something that we cherish. I'm an environmental engineer by trade, so we want to be a little ahead of the game in terms of what we do. And the result of that is, over the past few years, our rates don't increase nearly like the other states around us.
You recently went to Washington, D.C. specifically for the, I'm sure you go there
Too much.
for different reasons.
Once a month is once too much, right?
You went there for J-1 visas, which help seasonal workers. I think you was the State Department that's involved with that. So why the push for that?
Sure.
What was the State Department's reaction, and what does it mean for New Hampshire?
Yeah, so working, when I was running my business at Waterville Valley, we would bring in 30 or 40 international workers on J-1 visas. Most resorts and tourism destinations around the state will do that at some level because we just don't have the workers, as we've been discussing. And it's a great program. It's worked very well for decades. That program was drastically cut back over the past few years, and now they're finally opening it back up, primarily because of COVID and other reasons. But we hear all the time that they were, as strong as the industry was, we had resorts or restaurants that were shutting down instead of 7 days a week, going back to 5 days a week. Canterbury Lake Park, only opening 5, not 7 days a week. Places like that. We need the workers in the workforce. So I've pushed really hard for it. I've been on that side of it as an employer, but the responsibility from a state level was to really go down and get with the deputy assistant secretaries and say, okay, what's your plan? How are we going to get back to where we were? And what can you do to show me that New Hampshire is going to get those visa workers back? We typically get about 2,500 to 3,000 of them every year all across the state. Very, very important to keeping things viable. And it went very well. I think they understood exactly what we're talking about. I was explaining to them how the barrier breaks down if you don't have folks in those consulates in overseas, in those countries where the workers are coming from. If we're not staffing those, we can't do the interviews. If we don't have the staff in our Social Security offices here in America, they can't get their bank accounts. If they can't get their bank accounts, they can't get paid, and the whole thing falls apart. So I walked them through every single step. I mean, that was my experience on the business side of things, to understand, not just the bureaucracy of it, but how it really impacted the businesses. And I think they really got it. We got a very positive response. There's a few things they understand they have to kind of adjust and correct, but they're looking to do that and really get back to kind of that normal number that we're looking for. We could always use more. I don't think they're going to increase it anything above what they had traditionally 4 or 5 years ago. I think they should. But there's, I think, some political dynamics down there that isn't going to allow them to go over. They're taking about 100,000 a year across the country. They don't want to go higher than that. It's kind of a union thing. It's very frustrating, but be that as it may, we're just trying to get back to the level that we were at this state. I think we're going to get there, and I think just making sure that they hear our voice is very important.
And don't most states take advantage of this?
Oh, yeah.
So it's not just a New Hampshire thing.
Oh, no, it's all across the country. Like I said, about 100,000 workers come into America every year from countries all over the world under this program. That was cut way back to, I think 70 or 80,000. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it really affected New Hampshire when businesses are counting on 35 employees to come, but they only get 10 or they only get 20. They have to cut back on something because they don't have other workers to fill those positions, especially when they're seasonal in nature. So given all of that, I feel very confident that, you can't just write. I write letters all the time, and sometimes that's okay. But sometimes you got to get in the plane and go down and look at them in the eye one-on-one and say, look, I understand this process on both sides. Here's exactly how it's impacting our citizens and our businesses. Here's what we need you to do to fix it. And I think they got the message, which was good.
Is there another example you can give of a trip to D.C. on an issue or an initiative where it made sense for New Hampshire and you kind of had to, as you said, put your eyes on them and vice versa to get some things done for New Hampshire?
Yeah.
And then is there anything that you're hearing from your fellow governors where they're having issues again with the federal government?
Sure. The one that I go back to, I've done a lot of trips to D.C. to kind of to emphasize. The one I go back to was back in 2017, 2018, when we wrapped our arms around the opioid crisis, and I realized we have to rebuild a whole new system, right? To keep funneling the same money into a system where we saw the opioid deaths doing this for years wasn't going to work. So I came up with a few different ideas and a plan. I brought it down to D.C. I sat at the White House. I sat with the president. I sat with the president's staff at the time, the drug czar at the time. We laid out exactly how we wanted to spend some of these new funds that we were hoping to get. And ultimately, they created the SOR grant. We got those funds. They told us, go create the system that you put on paper. We believe in it. We want to see it. The result has been phenomenal. That effectively created the doorway system. Really this hub and spoke system, a very unique way of looking at how to deal with addiction and treatment, recovery, transitional housing. We invented recovery-friendly workplaces. That's, by the way, that is now, we invented it here in New Hampshire. That is now going to be a national program, which is very exciting. So we were able to do very innovative things lay it out on paper, look them in the eye, explain it to them in a very detailed way, and they believed in us, and they sent us the funds, and the result is over the last 2 years, we're the only state in the country where overdose deaths are not increasing. The only one in the country. That's really unbelievable, given kind of where we were. We still have a long way to go. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still lost 400 individuals last year, but the rest of the country is seeing their overdose deaths go about 60 to 70% over the last couple of years, and we're down just a little bit. So we're kind of bucking that national trend in a positive way. A lot more work to do, but that was a great example of just being able to explain the new system, the new design, not just the policy, the new design and implementation and how it was going to affect folks on an individual basis. They believed in, and we're getting results.
Want to talk about a topic that kind of comes and goes in folks' minds, and that's the First of the Nation primary. So there's, as you know, and I think we'd agree, it's very important for the state, in terms of visibility, the economic impact, and frankly, it's great for the democracy because candidates that don't have a lot of money can come to New Hampshire and make their pitch in a retail way, as opposed to going to California and only the wealthiest people are ever going to run for president. There's some concern that that could be at risk, First in the Nation. I've talked to some folks who are, had run before. On the Republican side, they don't seem to be as concerned, but on the Democrat side, they seem to have some things going on within their own party that raise questions. What's your take on it, and do you see that as a potential risk for our state?
So
and what could people do if that's the case?
No, it's a great question. So I think the First in the Nation primary is always kind of under attack. Everybody wants that. Frankly, we don't have the First in the Nation primary because of a nice tradition. We have it because we've earned it. I think we do it better than anybody else. We have a system with great integrity. It's locally controlled. We don't use big computers and things that can be hit with massive amounts of fraud or anything like that. We have one of the highest voter turnouts of any state, the highest participation rate. So we really get folks involved, and as you said, it can be a game changer sometimes for kind of newcomer candidates that don't have a lot of money per se to come and make their pitch as an individual, and that's how we look at them, as an individual. Now, is it under threat all the time? Yes. Is it more severe now than ever before? Yes. The Democrats in particular have really taken not a liking to the First of the Nation primary on a national level, being here in New Hampshire. Again, we don't have any Republicans in our federal delegation. I would hope that the Democrats in our federal delegation are pounding those phones every single day, trying to make folks realize how important it is. On the Republican side, I think they understand the value of local control, the value of local races, and the value of having newcomer candidates into the mix. The Democrats have just a very different mentality, and unfortunately, that puts the First of the Nation at a higher risk on their side than our side. But I think in that sense, we're all aligned. I think Chairman Buckley on the Democrat side and Chairman Stepanek on the Republican side are absolutely aligned in wanting to keep it. But unfortunately, there is a higher risk on the Democrat side right now. And not that they're going to listen to the Republican governor per se, but I think everyone needs to kind of have a strong voice in making folks realize it isn't just please let us have it. It's if you can get better metrics than us, if you can do better than we do, well, then maybe other folks have earned it. But there's no state that does it better than New Hampshire does. And I think if done on the kind of reputation that we've earned, hopefully we'll be able to keep it.
Switching gears a little bit, you've put a lot of focus this year on veteran service, and in fact, you laid out a proposal for a new veterans campus up in Franklin in your State of the State. I don't know how much play that's got, so can you explain that to folks?
Yeah, that's really exciting. I've always, I've worked with a lot of different veteran service organizations across the state, and they do tremendous work, and they all are a little bit different. Some focus on financial assistance for folks that just need to heat their house and put some, fix their windows up or whatever it is. Some folks on job creation for veterans. Some folks on mental illness. Some focus on opioids or recovery, whatever it is. They all do good work, but they kind of work in their own silos, and they work geographically differently. So I've always had a vision of bringing them all together under one roof. And Phil Taub at Swim with a Mission, who's just done a phenomenal job. The folks at Veterans Count and Easter Seals have done a phenomenal job. They're really all coming together with this idea of creating a central campus where all the different organizations, they don't lose their identity, but they get to work together in synergy. a place where veterans have, we can expand the homeless, the capacity for housing for homeless veterans, the capacity for some of these recovery programs or mental health programs. You can do things like equine therapy. It's a giant campus up in Franklin. It's available. The buildings are there. They need to be retrofit a little bit. And we were able to kind of come up with a plan to say, look, let's put this one-time money in, $20 million, give it to an organization that we know and trust like Easter Seals that has great experience in this, and really design something that has never been done before, not just in New Hampshire, but really in the country. We haven't found a model like this anywhere. It's a place where active military can come and work hand in hand with veterans, where we can have the federal VA also have a location potentially where asking them to come, have one of their locations on the site. So again, the state and the feds are kind of working different types of programs and different opportunities, but they're all there. So you know where to go and you know what can be achieved. And I just think the efficiency and the synergy and the ease of access for veteran services when you create something like that is going to be unprecedented. We have a higher number of veterans in our state than most other states. That's awesome. That is such an opportunity for us, but we need to live up to our end of the deal to making sure we're providing the right services, the right synergies, the right workforce opportunities for those individuals. Because I think we can be that kind of gold standard where I want everyone coming out of active military service to say, well, obviously we're going to look at going to New Hampshire because that's the place to be. That's the place that supports veterans, has services, and really believes in the responsibility that we uphold as a state to say thank you and provide the right services in the right way for families and individuals that have really sacrificed their entire lives for the freedom of this country.
You and I have talked about this, and I've heard you say this in other venues. The mental health crisis is really a big unspoken crisis and a huge thing that we're facing right now. And it's not just here; it's nationwide. What are the state's plans for that? How do we address that?
Yeah.
What do we need to do?
We've been doing some huge stuff. So we have. I always talk about when you're talking about mental health or opioids or issues of abused kids and child welfare. We have to have rural access to care, not just in Manchester and Bedford and Concord and Nashua. You need that rural access to care for all of these types of services. I think what we can do on mental health is no exception to that. And so one thing we've focused on is making sure we have beds in every single county. We have emergency services and emergency response teams that can get anywhere in the state at any time. And we used to have one of those, and now we have up to 3 at any given moment. We're looking to build 2 new mental health hospitals. We have one in New Hampshire, and we're looking to go hand in glove with the private sector, invest in some of our local hospitals on the seacoast and the Manchester area to build new state-of-the-art facilities that become a place where that workforce wants to be. We just bought and are investing in, the state will run its own mental health hospital strictly for children, right? You need a whole new world and dynamic of children's type services. That's very different than adults. And to mix the two together is a disservice to both. So having a place with outpatient services, emergency services, acute care, long-term care services for kids, knowing that COVID and a variety of other things. I mean, children were dealing with a lot of mental health issues that were going unaddressed before COVID, got very exacerbated during COVID. And so it's our job to make these investments to create the opportunity. So I think if we can create that prevention model, out of some of these facilities, where schools, our local mental health agencies, they're all working in synergy with hospitals so that we get more prevention in there. So we're talking about it. We're breaking down the stigma. I got to be honest. I know very few families or individuals or businesses that aren't dealing with, individuals at some stage, some part of the spectrum of some mental health crisis or illness or challenge at some level. So it's out there. It permeates. No one wants to really talk about it. So it's my job to make sure we're creating an access and a spectrum of services so it's super easy to get. We're doing something that is so simple, but I think is going to be transformative. The bill I'm going to sign next week will ensure that every student ID in the state has a mental health emergency number on it. Every student ID. So every household has that phone number. I never thought my child would be having a mental health crisis, or I would be as an adult in a tough situation. What do I do now? Grab the student ID, call the number. It's that simple, right? Just getting everyone to that simple, easy to grab access point. We don't want people searching the internet and worrying what to do and do I call and who do I call and what. That's it. Here's the right number. There's no wrong door anymore. And that's really what we've been focusing on. And so sometimes the answers can be simple. Sometimes they're more complex with bigger investments. But really, again, taking the unspoken crisis of mental health and talking about it ad nauseum. So it's really part of our lexicon, so people know exactly where to go and how to get help and services, so the stigma is broken down. We're making huge investments at the state level, there's no doubt. And I think over time that's really going to translate to just an ease of access for everybody across New Hampshire.
So I want to go back to COVID for a minute. And I think we're kind of on the backside of it, but you did a great job, leading our state, and I think our state was out the forefront on how we dealt with COVID on a lot of fronts, whether it was the business community, vaccinations, and that. And I know that was literally all you did and focused on for a period of time, and it was tough dealing with having to put restrictions in place. But you led well. What was it that got us to be less impacted financially than other states, and we led the way in vaccinations. Like, every day those numbers would come out, and we were there, not just regionally,
without forcing it, without government mandating it or anything like that.
So talk about your successes there, because I think a victory lap's in order.
It's not. So a couple things. Look, I think we're going to have another winter surge. We're already in a bit of a surge now. We're going to have another winter surge. I think our immune systems have really adapted. I think that the boosters work and the vaccines work. There's no doubt about that. That's really helped protect us. But the key to all of it was transparency, because we weren't going to mandate you must get a vaccine. We knew we were never going to go down that path, but by being very transparent, you earn public trust about what you're doing with businesses. With businesses, we talk to restaurants and would say, okay, you want your customers to feel comfortable coming in. We want to make sure you guys can stay open and your workers feel safe. So what guidelines do you want to see? And the restaurants came and kind of put forth a lot of guidelines, and Dr. Chan and I would work with them. And then we did it for bowling alleys, and we did it for barbershops, and we did it for everyone. There were some tough conversations there, but allowing the industries to be a huge stakeholder in the guidance that they wanted to see to be successful, I think was a way that we stayed open. And through the COVID pandemic, the Cato Institute ranked us #1 in the country for personal freedoms. #1. Yet we still had one of the lowest fatality rates in the country. And we were in New England, by the way, which was hit harder than anywhere else. So we were able to have our cake and eat it too. Transparency built public trust, so that when we talked about the validity of a vaccine, when we talked about the hows and whys we were doing anything, we could show the data, show the trends, and I think that got people to come along with us in terms of the hows and whys. Now, we weren't 100% sure of anything. We were kind of running that playbook as we were going, but we really tried to be very data driven, and knowing that no one had ever had to go through this before. And when we said we're all in it together, we really meant it. And so I would go into those press conferences almost ad nauseum, right? I would take questions from the press till they had nothing left to ask every single day, because that was telling me what was on their minds, where folks' anxiety was, and that allowed us, I think, to be super open about what we were seeing down the road. And if we didn't know something, we said we don't know, and that's okay. We'll find out, and we would quickly get on it and try to find answers for folks, knowing that there was a lot of anxiety and that people were carrying with their families, with their own health conditions, with their businesses. We stayed open more than any place in the country, but we still had guidelines in place. We were smart about how we did it, and we ended up with one of the lowest death rates. And that's a tribute to the whole team. And as you said, when we wanted to do a big vaccination site, we didn't have a government mandate, but we made it quick and easy. That was the other thing. Having folks get in and out of a vaccine site in 15 minutes, right, and get rid of all that anxiety, I think triggered a lot of other people to say, yeah, let's go be part of this. They're making it easy for us to do it. And that allowed us to be successful as a state.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time today, Governor.
No, you bet.
As always, it's very informative, and we look forward to having you back soon.
You bet. Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
Be good.